You're fired! The CEO's voice thundered through the opulent dining room of Chicago's La Lumiere, where crystal chandeliers cast a cold glow over a failing $4 billion merger. The black waitress, balancing a silver tray, stood frozen, her heart pounding. Once a brilliant Germanic studies scholar, she'd traded her dreams for survival, enduring whispered slurs, dismissive glances, and assumptions that her place was only to serve. The German delegation's icy silence and the American executive's desperation filled the air with tension. Yet her voice, poised to shatter the room's chaos, was moments from emerging. Could one woman, overlooked and underestimated, rewrite the fate of empires? Stay tuned to find out how her courage transforms a corporate battlefield. If this grips you, hit that subscribe button for more inspiring stories and drop a comment sharing where you're watching from. Don't miss the twist that'll keep you hooked. The private dining room of La Lumiere shimmered under the glow of a crystal chandelier, its facets scattering light across polished ebony walls like stars trapped in a Chicago night. The air, however, was anything but luminous. It crackled with tension, heavy as the velvet drapes that muffled the city's hum. At the center of a long mahogany table sat Robert Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, his tailored suit as sharp as his ambition. His jaw was tight, his knuckles white around a silver pen, as he faced Wilhelm Ritter, the stoic patriarch of Ritter Technology, a German engineering titan. Their delegations flanked them, American executives in crisp suits, Germans in austere formality, locked in a silent war. A $4 billion merger, the kind that could redefine industries, teetered on the edge of collapse, suffocated by a chasm of language and culture. For 3 hours, the room had been a battlefield of miscommunication. The translator, a high-priced consultant named Peterson, had stumbled through German phrases, his vocabulary crumbling under pressure. An hour ago, Sterling had dismissed him with a venomous whisper, "Get out! You're useless!" Now the Americans fumbled with halting English and hand gestures, while Ritter's delegation sat like statues, their untouched plates of venison medallions growing cold. The deal was dying, not in a blaze of arguments, but in the slow, agonizing choke of misunderstanding. Sterling's COO, Margaret Lang, a poised woman with graying hair, leaned toward him, her voice low. "Robert, we're losing them. We need a miracle." Across the room, Aisha Thompson moved with the silent grace of someone trained to be invisible. A black woman in her late 20s, her warm brown eyes held a quiet intensity, her beauty understated in the starched black uniform of a La Lumiere waitress. She wasn't supposed to be here. The private dining room was reserved for senior staff, but a last-minute absence had thrust her into the high-stakes service. Her silver tray, balanced expertly on one hand, gleamed as she refilled water glasses, her movements precise yet unnoticed. Aisha had once been a star PhD candidate in Germanic studies at Northwestern. Her dissertation on Vertrauen, the German concept of trust in industrial ethics, poised to earn her a professorship. But life had other plans. Her mother's terminal illness had drained their savings, leaving Aisha to support her younger sister Naya through high school. The dream of academia had been shelved, replaced by late-night shifts and cash tips to keep the lights on in their cramped apartment. As she glided past the table, Aisha caught fragments of the chaos. Sterling, his voice loud and slow as if addressing children, gestured wildly. "Synergy! You and me, together!" He pressed two fingers together, a clumsy pantomime of unity. Ritter's piercing gray eyes narrowed, his face a mask of disdain. He murmured to his deputy in low, guttural German, "He thinks we're fools," waving his hands like a street vendor. The deputy, a severe woman in her 40s, replied, "It's an insult. This deal is a farce." Isha's heart skipped. She understood every word. Her years of studying Goethe, Schiller, and the nuances of German industrial philosophy flooded back, sharp and vivid. The language wasn't just words to her. It was a bridge to a culture, a history, a way of thinking. But Aisha also heard the whispers from the American side. James Carter, a junior executive with slick-back hair and an air of entitlement, leaned toward Margaret Lang. "This waitress doesn't belong in a place like this," he muttered, his eyes flicking toward Aisha's dark skin and simple uniform. The comment stung, a subtle jab that assumed her presence was a mismatch for the room's grandeur. Aisha's grip tightened on the tray, but she kept her face neutral, her training as a server overriding the urge to react. She'd endured worse: patrons who ignored her, managers who questioned her fit for front-of-house roles, customers who assumed she couldn't possibly be educated. Each slight was a reminder of the world's low expectations, but she swallowed them. For Nia's sake, Sterling's frustration boiled over. He slammed his pen onto the table, the sharp crack making the silverware rattle. "This is a catastrophe," he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "Billions of dollars, years of work, and we're stuck because no one can speak German." Margaret's face paled, her eyes darting to Ritter, who folded his napkin with deliberate precision, a gesture that screamed finality. His delegation began gathering their briefcases, the leather snapping shut like a death knell. Margaret tried to salvage the moment, her voice calm but strained. "Herr Ritter, please, there's just a language barrier. The fundamentals of this deal are strong." Ritter's response was a single sentence in German, his tone even but laced with pity. "The fundamentals are irrelevant if there's no respect." Aisha, standing by the service station, felt the words like a punch. She knew Vertrauen trust was the cornerstone of Ritter's ethos, a century-old legacy rooted in family and community. The Americans didn't see it. To them, this was a transaction, a spreadsheet of numbers. To Ritter, it was a covenant. James Carter, desperate to prove himself, held up his phone. "I've got an app, Mr. Sterling. I took some German in college. Let me try." Sterling, grasping at straws, nodded. "Do it, James. Anything's better than this." Carter cleared his throat and spoke, his German clumsy and riddled with errors. He tried to explain profit projections but used the informal DU, a term for friends or children, when addressing Ritter, a man whose formality demanded respect. It was like slapping the German CEO on the back and calling him buddy. Ritter's cheek twitched, his silence now a wall of judgment. Aisha winced internally. Carter wasn't just wrong. He was offensive, dismantling any chance of trust. Margaret caught Ritter's gesture, the napkin, the briefcases, and her eyes widened in panic. "Robert," she whispered, "they're leaving." Sterling's composure cracked. He stood, his face flushed, his voice a low growl. "This is over. Years of planning, gone because we can't communicate." The room fell silent, the weight of failure pressing down like a storm cloud. Aisha stood frozen, tray in hand, trapped in the crossfire. She saw the deal slipping away, the Americans' desperation, the Germans' cold resolve. But more than that, she felt the sting of another comment from Carter, muttered under his breath to a colleague. "She's just a waitress. Probably doesn't even understand what's happening." The assumption that her blackness, her role, her very existence made her incapable, lit a spark of defiance deep within her. Aisha's mind raced. Her training screamed at her to stay invisible, to clear plates and disappear. Getting involved was professional suicide. She needed this job. Naya's high school fees depended on it. But the scholar in her, the woman who'd once debated German philosophy in lecture halls, couldn't stay silent. Ritter's deputy murmured one final jab. "American arrogance. They expect us to bend to their ways." The words echoed Aisha's own buried pride, the part of her that had memorized the cadence of Heimat, the German concept of home and belonging. She could let this moment pass, or she could step into the abyss. The room held its breath as Ritter pushed his chair back, the legs scraping mournfully against the polished floor. The deal was dead. Sterling's empire was crumbling, and Aisha, the unseen waitress, stood at the edge of a choice that could change everything, or destroy her. The dining room at La Lumiere was a tomb of silence, the weight of a dying $4 billion merger pressing down on every soul. The chandelier's light flickered, casting jagged shadows across the mahogany table, where Robert Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, stood, his face flushed with fury. His pen lay abandoned, a casualty of his earlier outburst, as Wilhelm Ritter and his German delegation prepared to leave. Ritter's folded napkin, crisp and final, sat like a gravestone on the table. The Germans' briefcases clicked shut, each snap a nail in the coffin of Sterling's ambitions. Margaret Lang, the COO, leaned forward, her voice a desperate plea. Herr Ritter, please, we can find a way forward. But Ritter's gray eyes were cold, his posture unyielding, as if the room itself had betrayed him. Isha Thompson stood by the service station, her silver tray a shield against the chaos. Her heart pounded, each beat echoing the German deputy's biting words. American arrogance. They expect us to bend to their ways. The phrase stung, not just for its truth, but for its echo of the slights Aisha had endured all night. James Carter, the junior executive, had already dismissed her presence with a whispered jab about her not belonging in the room's opulence. Now as the deal crumbled, his voice carried another barb, muttered to a colleague, "What's she still doing here? Shouldn't she be clearing plates?" The assumption that her blackness, her role as a waitress, rendered her irrelevant, ignited a fire in her chest. Aisha's grip on the tray tightened, her knuckles paling against the silver. She wasn't supposed to hear the Germans' murmured disdain, but her years as a PhD candidate in Germanic studies at Northwestern had sharpened her ears to every nuance of their language. Ritter's deputy had spoken of arrogance, a word heavy with judgment, and Aisha felt its weight. She knew the cultural chasm dividing the two sides. Sterling's team saw the merger as a ledger of profits, while Ritter's was a legacy forged in family and community. Her abandoned dissertation on Vertrauen, trust as the bedrock of German industrial ethics, flashed through her mind. A reminder of the scholar she'd been before her mother's illness forced her to trade lecture halls for late-night shifts. Nia, her teenage sister, depended on her paycheck, but the scholar in Aisha was screaming to be heard. James Carter, emboldened by desperation, raised his phone, its screen glowing with a translation app. "I can fix this, Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice tinged with bravado. "I've got some German from college." Sterling, his eyes wild with the panic of a drowning man, nodded. "Do it, James. We're out of options." Carter cleared his throat and launched into a mangled string of German, his accent thick and his grammar a disaster. Attempting to discuss market synergies, he used the informal du to address Ritter, a man whose formality demanded the respectful sigh. It was a linguistic slap, as if Carter had called the German CEO pal in a boardroom. Ritter's cheek twitched, a muscle betraying his offense. His deputy whispered, "This is worse than silence. He mocks us with his ignorance." Aisha's breath caught. Carter's blunder wasn't just a mistake. It was a cultural insult, dismantling any hope of trust. She saw Ritter's hand move to his briefcase, his posture signaling departure. Margaret's eyes widened, her voice a strained whisper. "Robert, they're leaving. We've lost them." Sterling's face contorted, a mix of rage and despair. He stood slamming his palm on the table, the sound sharp enough to make the crystal glasses tremble. "This is over," he roared, his voice raw. "Years of planning, billions of dollars, gone because we can't speak their language." The room froze, the air thick with the metallic taste of failure. Ritter pushed his chair back, the legs scraping mournfully against the polished floor, a sound that echoed like a funeral dirge. Aisha stood rooted, her tray heavy in her hands. Her training as a waitress demanded she remain invisible, a ghost moving through the room's chaos. Getting involved was madness. She could lose her job, her only means of paying Nia's school fees. But the words of Ritter's deputy burned in her mind. They expect us to bend to their ways. They mirrored the slights she'd faced all her life. Patrons who looked past her, managers who questioned her fit for upscale service, Carter's smug assumption that she was just a waitress. Each jab had built a quiet rage, a defiance rooted in the pride of her academic past. She'd once stood before professors, dissecting Goethe and the philosophy of Heimat, home, belonging, identity. That part of her refused to stay silent. As Ritter turned to leave, his deputy muttered one final barb in German. "They have no depth, no respect for our legacy." The words were a spark to Aisha's resolve. Before fear could chain her, she took a single step forward, her rubber-soled shoes silent on the plush carpet. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but sharp, cutting through the room's despair like a blade. In flawless, formal German, she addressed Ritter directly. "Excuse me, Herr Ritter, but your assessment is not entirely fair." The room went still, as if the chandelier had stopped swaying. Ritter froze mid-turn, his gray eyes widening in astonishment. His delegation, their briefcases half raised, stared at the waitress in her simple black uniform, as if she'd conjured herself from thin air. Sterling's head snapped toward her, his face a storm of confusion and fury. "Who the hell are you?" he barked, pointing a trembling finger. "You're fired. Get out of my sight." His words were a whip, meant to banish her back to the shadows. Margaret's hand twitched, as if to intervene, but she hesitated, her eyes darting between Aisha and Ritter. Carter smirked, leaning toward a colleague. "A waitress speaking German? She probably overheard something and thinks she's clever." His tone dripped with condescension, implying her intelligence was a fluke, her presence an intrusion into their elite world. The jab cut deep, but Aisha held her ground, her gaze locked on Ritter. The German CEO turned fully to face her, his posture rigid with curiosity. In German, he asked, his voice low and measured, "You speak our language?" It was less a question than a marvel, as if he'd discovered a rare artifact in the midst of chaos. Aisha nodded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline roaring in her veins. "Yes, Herr Ritter, I studied Germanic studies. Your culture, your values, they were to be my life's work." The words carried a weight beyond language, a signal of her deep immersion in his world. Ritter's deputy, the severe woman, raised an eyebrow, her skepticism softening into intrigue. The American side, however, was a cauldron of confusion. Sterling's rage faltered, replaced by bewilderment. "What did she say?" he demanded, turning to Carter, who stammered, I don't know, sir. It's too fast." Aisha ignored them, her focus on Ritter. She continued in German, her tone respectful but firm. "Your colleague spoke of arrogance, but the issue is a misunderstanding. Mr. Sterling sees this merger as a transaction, a matter of numbers. You see it as a legacy, a commitment to your family's century-old values." Her words hung in the air, a lifeline thrown across a cultural abyss. Ritter's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in intense focus, as if seeing her for the first time. The room's atmosphere shifted, the weight of failure lifting just enough to let hope flicker. Sterling's voice cut through, sharp and menacing. "Miss, whatever your name is, you're out of line. This is my meeting." But Ritter raised a hand, a gesture as commanding as it was subtle, silencing the CEO. He addressed Aisha again, his German deliberate. "You understand us. Explain this misunderstanding." It was a challenge, a test. Aisha's heart hammered, her mind racing. She could retreat, apologize, and save her job. Or she could step fully into the abyss, risking everything for a chance to bridge the divide. The scholar in her, buried but never dead, demanded she speak. The air in La Lumiere's private dining room hung heavy, as if the chandelier's light had dimmed under the weight of a $4 billion merger teetering on collapse. Aisha Thompson sat at the mahogany table, her starched black waitress uniform stark against the plush velvet of the translator's chair. Moments ago, she'd been an invisible server. Now, all eyes were on her, Wilhelm Ritter's gray gaze probing, Robert Sterling's face a storm of suspicion, and James Carter's smirk dripping with disdain. Ritter, the German CEO, had commanded her to sit, his hand silencing Sterling's threat to fire her. Aisha's heart pounded, her hands folded tightly to hide their tremble. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a scholar thrust into a corporate battlefield, her fluency in German and cultural insight the only bridge across a chasm of misunderstanding. Ritter leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate in German. "Explain this misunderstanding, Miss—" "Thompson," Aisha replied, her tone steady despite the adrenaline surging through her. "Aisha Thompson." She took a breath, her years of studying Germanic studies at Northwestern crystallizing into this moment. "Herr Ritter, Mr. Sterling's team views this merger as a transaction. Metrics, profits, shareholder value. You see it as a legacy, a century-old commitment to your family's values and your community." The disconnect lies in these perspectives. Ritter's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in keen interest, as if she'd unlocked a door he thought was sealed. Sterling shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. "What's she saying?" he demanded, glaring at James Carter, who shrugged helplessly, his phone app useless against Aisha's fluent German. Carter muttered to Margaret Lang, the COO, "She's out of her depth. A waitress playing translator?" His tone, laced with condescension, implied her intelligence was an anomaly, her blackness a barrier to credibility. Aisha ignored the jab, her focus locked on Ritter. She continued in German, her voice clear and academic. "Your colleague called it arrogance, but it's a failure to see your lens of Heimat, home, identity, a bond to your people. This is why the deal falters." Ritter's deputy, a severe woman in her 40s, leaned forward, her skepticism softening. "You understand Heimat?" she asked, her German crisp. Aisha nodded. "I studied it extensively. It's not just a place, it's a promise, a responsibility to community. Your company's legacy isn't in profits alone, but in the trust you've built over generations." Ritter's expression shifted, a flicker of respect breaking through his stoic facade. He reached into his briefcase and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "Paragraph 19, he said in German, his voice a command. "The legacy clause. Read it. Tell me what it means." Aisha's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the document. The text was not dense legalese, but a poetic covenant, written in elegant German. It outlined Ritter Technologies' commitment to its workforce and the town where it was founded. No more than 5% of local employees could be laid off annually without retraining programs, and a portion of profits would fund community apprenticeships. It was a vow to preserve the social fabric, a reflection of the German Mittelstand ethos where businesses are pillars of community. Aisha's dissertation on Vertrauen had explored this very principle. Trust as a structural promise, not mere sentiment. She saw the clause for what it was, the soul of Ritter's company codified. She turned to Sterling, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Sterling, paragraph 19, which your team calls the legacy clause, isn't sentimental fluff. It's a guarantee to protect Ritter's employees in their town, ensuring the merger doesn't strip away their identity. It's about Heimat, a concept of belonging that's sacred in German culture." Sterling's brow furrowed, his frustration evident. "Our lawyers say it's a liability," he snapped. "It's unenforceable nonsense." Aisha held his gaze unflinching. "Your lawyers are wrong. This clause is a structural commitment, like a constitution for Ritter's community. It's why they won't sign without it." Margaret Lang, watching Aisha with a shrewd intensity, leaned forward. "Robert, listen to her. She's making sense." But Carter scoffed, his voice low but audible. "She's a waitress, not a lawyer. How does she know what's in the contract?" The remark, tinged with racial undertones, assumed her role and appearance disqualified her expertise. Aisha's stomach tightened, but she pressed on, turning back to Ritter. In German, she elaborated. "Herr Ritter, Mr. Sterling's team has misunderstood the clause because it was poorly translated. They were told it's sentimental, but it's a binding promise to your people, a legacy your grandfather built." Ritter's eyes softened, a rare warmth breaking through. "Who advised them it was sentimental?" he asked, his tone sharp. Aisha hesitated, then pointed to a handwritten note at the bottom of the document, initialed JC. It read, "Client insists on this clause. Recommend removal. Sentimental, no quantifiable value." She looked at Carter, whose face paled, a bead of sweat tracing his temple. "Mr. Carter," she said in English, her voice steady, "labeled it sentimental, but he mistranslated Heimat. It's not about feelings. It's about roots, responsibility, a century of trust." Carter flinched, his earlier bravado crumbling. I was summarizing for the lawyers," he stammered, but Sterling's glare silenced him. Aisha turned back to Ritter, her German flowing with academic precision. "This misunderstanding has framed the clause as a burden, but it's the heart of your company's identity. Mr. Sterling's team sees it as a risk because they don't grasp its cultural weight." Ritter nodded slowly, his posture relaxing for the first time. You see what we see, he said in German, his voice almost reverent. But can your CEO see it? Aisha's heart raced. She was no longer just translating, she was reshaping the narrative, turning a corporate standoff into a dialogue of values. She faced Sterling again, her voice a bridge between worlds. Mr. Sterling, Herr Ritter asks if you can understand the clause's importance, not as a liability, but as a commitment to his company's soul. It's not about legal risk, it's about honoring a legacy. Sterling's eyes narrowed, his mind grappling with the shift. He was used to balance sheets, not cultural philosophy. What's he want me to do? He asked, his tone grudging but curious. Aisha seized the moment, her words careful but bold. He wants you to see the merger not just as a deal, but as a partnership with his community. The clause ensures that trust endures. Ritter leaned forward, his German direct. Tell him what we mean by partnership. Not his words, ours. Aisha nodded, her mind racing to find the right idiom. She spoke to Sterling, her voice steady but infused with passion. Herr Ritter sees your company's innovation as a spark, but his precision as the foundation. He wants a merger where both sides build something lasting, not just profitable. Sterling blinked, the concept sinking in. For the first time, he looked at Ritter not as an obstacle, but as a man with a vision. Margaret's eyes gleamed with calculation, seeing Aisha as an unexpected asset. She's right, Robert, she said softly. This could change everything. But Carter, his ego bruised, muttered to a colleague, she's grandstanding. A waitress shouldn't be lecturing us. The comment, laced with the assumption that Aisha's role and race diminished her authority, stung like a whip. Yet Aisha stood tall, her scholar's pride outweighing the insult. She was no longer invisible. She was the fulcrum of the room, holding the deal's fate in her words. Ritter's deputy handed Aisha another page, a technical addendum to the clause. Read this too, she said in German. See if you can explain it to them. Aisha scanned the text, her mind translating its intent. A commitment to reinvest profits into apprenticeships, preserving the German tradition of craftsmanship. She turned to Sterling, her voice unwavering. This addendum ensures that Ritter's town thrives, training the next generation. It's not charity, it's a strategy for sustainability. Ritter nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, a sign of trust she'd earned. The room's tension eased, a fragile hope taking root. Aisha's words had cracked the wall between the two sides, but the deal was still a tightrope. She was a waitress, yet she'd become the room's only hope, her voice weaving a thread of understanding where none had existed. The private dining room at La Lumiere pulsed with a new energy, the suffocating chill of failure giving way to a fragile warmth. The chandelier's light seemed brighter, casting a hopeful glow across the mahogany table where Aisha Thompson sat, her waitress uniform a stark contrast to the opulence around her. Moments ago, she had been an invisible server. Now she was the linchpin of a $4 billion merger, her fluent German and cultural insight bridging a divide that had nearly doomed the deal. Wilhelm Ritter, the stoic CEO of Ritter Technology, leaned forward, his gray eyes fixed on her with a mix of respect and expectation. Robert Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, watched her warily, his earlier fury tempered by a grudging curiosity. The room held its breath, waiting for the next move in this high-stakes dance. Aisha's voice, steady and resonant, carried the weight of her academic past. She had just reframed the legacy clause, paragraph 19, not as a legal burden, but as a covenant of trust, rooted in the German concept of Heimat. Now Ritter challenged her to guide Sterling toward a deeper understanding. Tell him, Ritter said in German, his tone firm but open, what it means to be a partner, not just a buyer. Aisha nodded, her mind racing to translate not just words but values. She turned to Sterling, her voice clear and deliberate. Herr Ritter wants you to see this merger as a shared legacy, not just a transaction. He's asking you to honor his company's commitment to its people, to build something that lasts beyond profits. Sterling's brow furrowed, his world of balance sheets and quarterly reports clashing with this unfamiliar terrain. I'm a businessman, not a philosopher, he said, his tone sharp but tinged with uncertainty. Aisha seized the moment, her scholar's instincts kicking in. Then think like an engineer, sir. Ritter's precision is the foundation. Your innovation is the spark. Together, you can create something enduring. Her words, a blend of technical and cultural imagery, struck a chord. Sterling leaned back, his eyes flicking to Ritter, seeing him anew, not as an obstacle, but as a craftsman with a vision. Ritter's deputy, a severe woman with a sharp gaze, handed Aisha a technical brief, her German crisp. Ask Mr. Sterling how he'll uphold our apprenticeship model. We need specifics. Aisha scanned the document, her mind parsing its details. A commitment to fund training programs for young workers in Ritterstown, preserving a century-old tradition of craftsmanship. She turned to Sterling, her voice steady. Herr Ritter wants to know how you'll integrate his apprenticeship system. It's not just about jobs, it's about nurturing the next generation of builders. Sterling hesitated, unaccustomed to such questions. We'll keep the jobs, he said gruffly. Isn't that enough? Aisha shook her head, her tone gentle but firm. It's not just about keeping jobs, sir. It's about investing in people, ensuring Ritterstown thrives for decades. They want a partner who values their craft as much as their profits. She translated this to Ritter, framing Sterling's response in the language of Fortschritt durch Technik, progress through technology. Mr. Sterling acknowledges your workforce's value, she said in German. He's open to learning how your apprenticeship model can strengthen the merger. Ritter's eyes softened, a faint nod signaling his approval. For the first time, he leaned forward, engaged. Margaret Lang, the COO, watched Aisha with a calculating intensity, recognizing her as a game changer. Robert, she whispered, she's turning this around. But James Carter, his ego bruised, muttered to a colleague, she's acting like she runs the show. A waitress shouldn't be calling the shots. His words, laced with a sneer that dismissed Aisha's race and role, stung like a barb. Aisha's jaw tightened, but she focused on Ritter, refusing to let Carter's prejudice derail her. She'd faced worse. Patrons who assumed she was uneducated, managers who overlooked her for promotions, always with that unspoken assumption that her blackness made her less capable. Ritter posed a pointed question in German, his voice probing. How will Mr. Sterling ensure our plant manager has autonomy to prioritize local needs over short-term gains? Aisha translated, her voice steady. Herr Ritter asks how you'll empower his plant manager to make decisions that benefit the community, even if they don't show immediate profits. Sterling blinked, caught off guard. Autonomy? He said, almost to himself. Our managers follow corporate strategy. Aisha saw the gap and bridged it. In Ritter's world, sir, local autonomy is trust in action. It's how they've built a legacy that lasts. She turned to Ritter, her German precise. Mr. Sterling is considering a structure where your plant manager has decision-making power to align with community values. The room's dynamic shifted, the tension easing as Ritter's delegation exchanged glances, their stoic masks softening. Aisha's translations weren't just words. They were a cultural alchemy, turning Sterling's corporate jargon into Ritter's language of legacy. She suggested a bold idea, prompted by her dissertation's insights. Mr. Sterling, she said in English, what if you propose a joint council to oversee the legacy clause? It could include Ritter's team and yours, ensuring both sides honor the community's needs. Sterling's eyes lit up, the concept clicking. A council, he said, nodding. Tell him that. Aisha translated, her German vibrant. Mr. Sterling proposes a joint heritage council, co-chaired by both companies, to safeguard your town's future. Ritter's lips curved into a rare smile, a sign of genuine engagement. A council, he said in German, is a start. But what of the youth? Our apprentices are our legacy. Aisha relayed this to Sterling, adding context. He's asking about supporting young workers, sir. In Germany, apprenticeships are a rite of passage, a promise to the future. Sterling, now fully attentive, leaned forward. Okay, he said, his voice steady. Tell him we'll fund a scholarship program for their high school students, focusing on engineering. We'll build a pipeline for their apprentices. Aisha translated, her words painting a vivid picture. Mr. Sterling envisions a scholarship fund to nurture young talent in your town, ensuring your craft endures. The German delegation murmured approvingly, their earlier frost melting into warmth. Ritter's deputy nodded, her skepticism replaced by admiration. "This woman understands us," she said in German, her voice low but clear. Aisha's heart swelled, her scholar's pride rekindled. She was no longer the invisible waitress. She was a conductor, orchestrating a symphony of understanding. But Carter's resentment simmered. "She's stealing the spotlight," he hissed to a colleague, his tone implying Aisha's audacity was an affront to her place. The jab, rooted in her race and status, was a reminder of the world's low expectations. But Aisha pushed it aside, her focus unwavering. Sterling, now fully engaged, spoke with a newfound clarity. "Tell Ritter I get it," he said, his voice softer, almost reverent. "This isn't just a deal, it's a partnership. I want to build something lasting with him." Aisha translated, infusing his words with the German concept of Vertrauen. "Mr. Sterling sees your vision, Herr Ritter. He seeks a partnership that honors your legacy, not just your assets." Ritter leaned back, his posture relaxed, and for the first time, he smiled fully, his gray eyes warm. "This is what I needed to hear," he said in German, his voice resonant. The room transformed, the air now electric with possibility. The Germans, once stone-faced, exchanged smiles, their briefcases forgotten. Margaret's eyes gleamed with approval, but Carter's face darkened, his failure exposed. "She's just a fluke," he muttered, his voice barely audible, but sharp with prejudice. Aisha ignored him, her focus on the breakthrough she'd engineered. Ritter stood, extending his hand to Sterling. In halting English, he said, "We have a deal. Paragraph 19 stays." Sterling grasped his hand, a wide smile breaking across his face. "You have my word," he replied, relief flooding the room. Sterling turned to Carter, his voice cold. "Margaret will see you tomorrow, James. Bring your resignation." Carter's face crumpled, his ambition shattered. Aisha, still seated, felt the weight of her triumph. She had turned the tide, not just saving the deal, but rewriting its terms with a language of trust. The dining room at La Lumiere glowed with a newfound warmth, the chandelier's light dancing across the mahogany table as if celebrating the resurrection of a $4 billion merger. The air, once thick with the metallic tang of failure, now hummed with relief and camaraderie. Robert Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, clasped Wilhelm Ritter's hand, their handshake sealing a deal that had teetered on collapse just hours ago. Ritter's German delegation, their stoic mass replaced by genuine smiles, raised glasses of vintage cognac and a quiet toast. Aisha Thompson sat at the table, her waitress uniform a stark reminder of her improbable journey from the shadows to the heart of this triumph. Her fluent German and cultural insight had not only saved the deal, but rewritten its soul, turning a transactional standoff into a partnership of trust. Sterling's laughter, a rare sound, mingled with Ritter's low, resonant voice as they shared a moment of mutual respect. Margaret Lang, the COO, stood nearby, her eyes gleaming with admiration for the woman who had turned the tide. James Carter's chair was empty, his resignation looming after his catastrophic missteps. Aisha, still seated in the translator's chair, felt like she was in a dream. Her heart raced, not with fear now, but with a surreal mix of disbelief and pride. She had entered this room to clear plates, her only goal to earn enough tips to cover Nia's school fees. Now she was the architect of a corporate miracle, her scholar's mind reawakened after years of dormancy. Sterling turned to her, his face softening as he pulled up a chair and sat across from her. No longer a CEO addressing a subordinate, but a man acknowledging a peer. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong, rude, dismissive, and ready to fire the most valuable person in this room." His admission hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. Aisha, still processing the whirlwind, murmured, "It's okay, Mr. Sterling. You were under pressure." He shook his head, his eyes unwavering. "That's no excuse. What you did wasn't just translation. You saw through the noise, understood what mattered. That's a gift." Margaret approached, her smile warm but professional. "That was extraordinary, Aisha," she said, her voice low with awe. "I've never seen anything like it in 30 years. But even in this moment of triumph, a shadow lingered. A junior executive, lingering near the table, whispered to a colleague, "She'll need to dress the part for a boardroom. That uniform won't cut it." The comment, veiled as advice, carried the sting of prejudice, implying Aisha's appearance, her blackness, her working-class roots, didn't fit the corporate world's polished image. Aisha's jaw tightened, but she let the remark slide, her focus on the moment she'd earned. Sterling leaned forward, his tone serious. "I had Margaret pull your file during the talks. Northwestern, PhD candidate in Germanic studies, full scholarship, top of your class. What happened?" His question was gentle, not accusatory, but it pierced Aisha's carefully guarded heart. For the first time in years, she felt no shame in answering. "My mother got sick," she said softly, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "Cancer. It drained everything we had. I became the sole provider for my sister Nia. She's 17, in high school. My dissertation, my dreams of teaching, they had to wait. Waitressing paid the bills." She paused, her eyes distant. "I never thought I'd use my studies again. Not like this." Sterling listened, his face unreadable but attentive. When she finished, he was silent for a moment, then spoke with quiet conviction. "You gave up your future for your family. That's not just sacrifice. That's honor, the kind Ritter was fighting for in that clause." He leaned back, his decision made. "This isn't a job offer, Miss Thompson, because serving tables isn't your calling. I'm creating a new role, Vice President of Global Cultural Strategy, reporting directly to me. You'll ensure we never misstep like this again. The salary will cover Nia's college, 10 times over, and we'll fund your PhD if you want to finish it." Aisha stared, her breath catching. The words, Vice President, felt like a fairy tale, too vast to grasp. Waitresses didn't leap to corporate suites, especially not black women who'd spent years swallowing slights about their place. Her mind flashed to the countless times she'd been overlooked, her intelligence dismissed, her presence questioned. Yet here, in this gilded room, her voice had reshaped empires. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her composure faltering for the first time. Margaret smiled, stepping closer. "Say yes, Aisha. We need you more than you need us." Her words were a lifeline, cutting through Aisha's doubt. Ritter, preparing to leave with his delegation, approached Aisha one last time. His gray eyes, once cold, now shone with gratitude. In German he spoke, his voice resonant with emotion. "Miss Thompson, in my 70 years, I've worked with diplomats, CEOs, and the best consultants money can buy. None have matched your ability to bridge worlds. You didn't just translate our words, you translated our hearts." He switched to halting English, ensuring everyone heard. "You saved this partnership." He handed her a simple, elegant business card, his smile warm. "If this man ever undervalues you, call me. There's a place for you at Ritter Technology, the highest place." Tears pricked Aisha's eyes, not of sorrow, but of restoration. The scholar she'd buried, the woman who'd once dreamed of dissecting Heimat in lecture halls, was alive again. Ritter's words were a validation of her worth, a counterpoint to every whispered jab she'd endured. Margaret, watching the exchange, made a mental note to ensure Aisha's transition to Sterling Enterprises was seamless. The junior executive's earlier comment lingered in the air, but Aisha stood taller, her pride a shield against the prejudice that had tried to dim her light. As the Germans departed, their briefcases now symbols of a sealed alliance, Aisha rose from the table. Her rubber-soled shoes felt out of place against the polished floor, but her steps were steady. She walked out of La Lumiere into the Chicago night, the wind biting but unable to touch the warmth within her. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Nia. "Sis," she said, her voice breaking with joy. "We're going to be okay. Your college is covered. Everything's changing." Nia's excited squeal echoed through the line, a sound that grounded Aisha in the reality of her triumph. The city's skyline loomed, its lights a promise of a new path. Aisha was no longer the invisible waitress, the woman who'd endured slights about her fit or her place. She was Aisha Thompson, the scholar who'd spoken the language of trust, who'd turned a corporate battlefield into a bridge of understanding. Her past, her mother's illness, her abandoned dreams, wasn't a tragedy, but a foundation, preparing her for this moment. Her future was no longer about scraping by. It was about stepping into boardrooms, ensuring no voice was lost in translation. The weight of the night settled over her, not as a burden, but as a mantle of purpose. Aisha's story was a testament to the power of unseen brilliance, of courage forged in adversity. She'd faced a world that tried to diminish her, from Carter's sneers to the executive's veiled jab about her appearance. Yet she'd emerged as the hero of a multi-billion-dollar legacy. Her journey proved that the quietest voices, tempered by hardship and wisdom, could reshape the world. Isha Thompson's journey from an overlooked waitress to a corporate hero is a powerful reminder that brilliance can shine in the most unexpected places. Her courage and cultural wisdom turned a failing $4 billion merger into a triumph, proving that empathy and understanding are true superpowers. What did you think of Aisha's story? Did it inspire you to recognize the hidden strengths in yourself or others? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how this resonated with you and where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive, so please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more tales of unsung heroes. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. We're grateful for every moment you spend with us. Stay tuned for more stories that uplift and inspire. Until next time, keep shining your own light.